Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're going to talk about the FiiO K11 amp DAC. This is only $130. It has great power and features. I'm actually really excited to talk about this because I've mentioned it in other roundup videos prior to this review because I've enjoyed it so much. Now, FiiO did send this to me for review. It won't affect what I say, but I always mention that as full disclosure. If you do end up watching this to the end and you decide to purchase it after watching the review, I will have links in the description below to help you find it. One of them is going to be a generic Amazon affiliate link. I also have the link to the FiiO store on AliExpress. And then I've worked with APOS Audio a lot, and they've sent to me other products to review from all different brands. They've been great to work with, and even through purchasing, I just like them as a trustworthy source. So I will have the APOS link as well. There's really no savings on any of these. Purchase it however you want. Any of those will support the channel, but if you're open to it, I suggest trying out APOS. They've been pretty solid for me. So let's start with the basics and talk about the unit layout itself. I really like this design. Obviously, I opted for black, but there is a silver option as well. On the note of the black, you can kind of see that there are some fingerprints. And even though I've cleaned this repeatedly, it seems like anytime I put my thumbprints on it, it leaves a mark eventually. I don't know if it's just the way it's finished or my hands or what. I don't like load my hands up with lotion, so I'm not sure. But anyway, the silver might hide it better, but the black looks better on my desk. When you look at the front of the unit, you have obviously a volume wheel, which is multifunction. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then you have the 6.3 millimeter and the 4.4 Pentagon output. So this is obviously a single-ended output, unbalanced, and it comes with the adapter in the box. For you American folk like myself, that's the 1/4-inch adapter, 6.3 everywhere else. And then the 4.4 is balanced. Looking at the back of the unit, you have a barrel connector. This is a standard 12 volt, 2 amp input. It obviously comes with the power supply, and that's part of why this has the power that it does, is because it's externally powered. USB-C input for the DAC. You also have optical and coaxial inputs and RCA outputs, which function as a preamp. Now, unless I missed how to do this or something changes down the road with firmware, you can toggle headphone versus preamp output, but I haven't had the ability or figured out a way to do both simultaneously. If you double press this, it'll actually change the preamp output automatically. You'll see like the HP and the PO. So it does do separate memory for the volume control. So if you are using it as a preamp, it defaults to 99, which is essentially full volume. So make sure that you're ready for that and you have your source gear turned down. And you switch back to headphone, it resumes where your headphone volume setting was at. You can also adjust that if you go into the in-depth menu, you can toggle it, but that's the quick way of doing it. Now, a single press of the knob is going to toggle through all of your inputs. Again, I mentioned the USB, and it does support DSD, and it supports 384 kilohertz max input. The RGB on the top, this logo actually lights up, and the default is going to basically change based off of whatever source you're using. The sample rate will affect the color, and there's 3 colors that will change as a result of that. You also have the ability to select your own color. It's not full RGB where you get any single color spectrum you want. There's no app. You toggle through multiple options, but there's a color for everybody. There's white, there's off, red, green, blue, yellow, you name it. Now, there's no Bluetooth option, so there's no wireless way to connect to this, unlike, something like the topping DX3 Pro Plus. This is designed to basically be used as a USB DAC, and then of course you get the benefits of the optical and coaxial. Now, one advantage to this though, that I really like about this and why I've recommended it a lot, is it has a UAC toggle mode, USB audio class, and it's default to 2, which is what you typically want. However, if you're a PlayStation user and you want to use this as an amp DAC for your PS5, you can switch it to UAC 1 and it gets detected on PS5 no problem. Once you've selected the K11, you want to make sure your PS5 volume is maxed out. That way you can use the volume on this. It will help with audio performance, and that's usually the way you want to operate it anyway. Even on medium gain, the volume gets loud enough to power even harder to drive headphones, but if you need a little bit more juice, high gain's an option as well. Now, the K11 does not have mic pass-through. There's no TRRS support. So for gaming headsets, you'll want to look elsewhere. But if you are using this on the PS5 or PC and you're using IEMs, but you want some kind of mic option, you have the Antlion Mod Mic Wireless, which is USB based, and the transmitter plugs into the front of your PlayStation, for example. Great for attaching to headphones, and then you use this as your output. If you want something more portable to clip on your shirt, this is the Ceramic Blink 500B2 Plus. I've used this and I covered this in a prior review, but this just attaches to your shirt with a magnet. It's a really convenient way. The sound quality is excellent, and then you can use that as your microphone for PS5. Press mute on your controller to mute it, but then you benefit from something like the K11 for driving those nicer headphones or IEMs. Now, pressing and holding the volume wheel will pull up the menu, and that's where you make some other more advanced changes. I already mentioned the pre-out, the UAC 1 and 2 for PlayStation, but you can also change your RGB settings. You can change your screen brightness from basically off or a dimmer to full bright. I usually just do the default 2 setting, and with RGB on the top, not only can you pick your color, but you can apply a pulsing effect, or you can change the brightness. Now, I find that the light on top is actually quite bright. It can be distracting at night, so I set mine to 2 out of 5 for the brightness, and it still looks good, but it's not like, you know, catching my attention out of the corner of my eye. Now, perhaps the most important change you can make on the K11 is the filter setting. So while you're in that menu, you'll see a default of F3 or filter 3. I highly recommend changing it. And even if you don't know what filters are, that's okay. But if you experiment with filters, in some cases, you can hear a difference. In some cases, and in a lot of cases, most, you won't hear a single change from all the filter options on the new DACs. Newer DACs are built to a level now that's so good, it's very hard to hear the difference on filter settings. It affects pre-ring, post-ring, attack decay, the upper frequencies as well. Some filters will have more, you know, roll-off, let's say between 18 and 20,000 hertz, for example. A lot of times, again, you won't hear the difference. But filter 3, the default filter, is the sharpest and most sibilant setting on the K11 out of the box. And I don't understand why, because when I use the same filter on much more expensive amps, like the K19 or the DX3 Pro Plus, which is not a lot more, but same general idea, they didn't have the same sibilance issue. So it has something to do with the topology of this particular DAC amp with that filter and the Cirrus Logic DAC chip that they used. It was evident on the FiiO FH7S IEM. This is a blast of an IEM. It's got really strong bass, definitely more of a U shape, but the treble sibilance was noticeable on the K11, and it was not an issue on any other DAC amp that I had. On the FiiO FT5, which is a darker sounding planar magnetic, didn't really have an issue with the default filter. Now, I still ended up settling on filter 1. That was usually my preferred one. Experiment for your own. Filter 6 is basically no filter. It's no oversampling or NOS. So try that as well. That's going to roll off your upper frequencies just a little bit. But yeah, for some reason, the default filter wasn't the best choice in my opinion. I think it pulls back some of the true potential of the K11, so highly suggest changing it. Now I want to talk about specs a little bit before I get into all of my sound quality and subjective stuff. But there's a lot to cover here on the specs because it does change the way this unit performs. It has a balanced output, and on a lot of DAC amps, balanced typically has more power. This is a fully discrete left and right channel balanced amplifier, so it does benefit from running balanced topology if you want more power. Now, the output characteristics are where this gets a little bit murky. It has a 1.2 ohm output impedance on unbalanced or single-ended, and then your balanced output has 2.4 ohms of output impedance, which is skirting the line for a little too high for me, because depending on what product you have, if you have an IEM that has multiple drivers in it of different impedance, having a higher output impedance can impact the tonality of an IEM. You won't really notice it on pretty much any modern headphone. Maybe on the Moondrop Para, which is only 8 ohm impedance, I would not recommend running balanced. Plus, on that note, because of the higher output impedance on balanced, if your impedance is below, let's say 24 ohms, it's actually going to get louder on the unbalanced, the single-ended output. It's just a byproduct of the way the amp is designed. So if you have something like the Hi-Fi-Men Edition XS, or the Moondrop Para, or the Odyssey MM100, I'm just sticking to $500 and below headphones for now to keep it simple, those will sound better on the single-ended connection. So save your money, use the stock cable, and you'll get more power. Now, if you use something like the FiiO FT5, that has a 36 ohm impedance. And then you go all the way up to the FT3, which is a 300 ohm impedance headphone. Lots of Bayer dynamic headphones are 250 and up. That's when you want to use the balance connection because it puts out a significant amount of power in that setting. Now, this is rated at 1400 milliwatts times 2 at 32 ohms in the balance connection and 520 times 2 unbalanced at 32 ohms. So it's more than enough power either way, but keep your pairings in mind for choosing the right output to get the volume that you want. Now the gains also affect the way the volume ramp up is, and this is a killer thing and why the K11 is recommended by me for a lot of applications, and it's because it has a digital gain knob. This is not an analog potentiometer, so if you have very sensitive, easy to drive products with an analog knob, especially in high gain, as you first approach that audible threshold, you usually have a channel imbalance, and unless you get a very expensive potentiometer, that's just the characteristics of how those analog volume controls or POTS potentiometers work. Digital gain maintains a perfect balance of left and right, so that's one advantage this has on easy to drive things. The low gain is a much more linear volume increase. The medium gain has more of a boost as you start approaching the 20 to 40 volume level, and there's an even greater ramp up in the high gain setting. When you're at like 60 to 70, the volume differences aren't as massive. It just ramps up sooner, so you get much quicker volume control instead of constantly spinning it to get a small amount of adjustment. Obviously, your peak output's going to be higher on high gain. Now, when it comes to subjective performance and what I've enjoyed on it, after I switched to filter 1 or 6, it is an incredible amp DAC. It's actually one of my favorites under 200, and I've been recommending it left and right on any chance I get. When I talk to people on forums, my Discord server, and even like that audio gaming roundup I did recently when I was recommending some amp DACs in gear. It's just an incredible product. The channel matching means that I can use IEMs or harder to drive headphones. I have this huge operational window, and for the price, it hits everything I'm looking for. I actually prefer digital gain because of the channel balance. This sound profile is more musical and bright and energetic than other amps in this price range. You have the iFi Zen DAC Air, which is really fun, uses a Burr Brown DAC. It's a little bit warmer, a little bit just slightly less resolving, a little bit more grainy in the treble. The advantage with the iFi Zen Air is it's USB bus powered. If you only want to run off a single USB, you can. It has significantly lower output, but for most moderate and easy to drive headphones, it's still enough. It has a bass boost button, basically the X bass. So if you want to chase more bass, that's when you would consider the Air. But for $30 more, this has so much more overhead and clean sound that to me it was a clear upgrade. Now it gets murky when you look at the DX3 Pro Plus. To me, this is where the next upgrade path would have taken you. It has a slightly darker, more compressed sound profile. The bass impact is great. This volume knob is clicky, but it's still digital gain, and it has Bluetooth, so that's really the only advantage. If you want just a little bit more power and Bluetooth, DX3 Pro Plus is fun. It's single-ended 3.5 millimeter only, so that can become a challenge for certain products you may have. If you have a variety of gear, the K11 overall is still more versatile to me. Now this monster of the K19 is their top-of-the-line flagship amp DAC from FiiO. In some cases, I like the K11's sound more than that. That is great. That one has some really trippy stuff with like crossfeed or expanded soundstage to kind of pull the image out of the center of your head and make it a little bit wider. But I love how concise and clear and tight everything was on the K11. I've liked this enough that it's actually been one of my go-to amp DACs when I'm gaming at night. If I'm just plugging in a mix of headphones and IEMs and gear, this is pretty much always on my desk now. And I have much more expensive amp DACs. If I had to compare this sound profile to any other amp DAC out there, it's closest to the shit Magni Modi stack. The Magni Modi, I think, has, when you push it to the limit, it has a little bit more control and impact to the bass, but it's just because it's a more expensive, more robust system. Overall, if you're not being against a bunch of other DAC amps, things sound very musical and bright and clear with this. It's just extremely resolving. There's no noise floor issues. It takes away all of the crap that a lot of people have to deal with when you're shopping with amp DACs, in my opinion. Now, I do want to address one thing. The firmware on this is now version 1.2.2 at the time of this review, which fixed one of my biggest issues originally, and that was latency. So it wasn't so much direct latency, but it would aggressively go to sleep. If there was no audio playing, it would suspend the audio state. So when you first play a song or play a game, or it's a nightmare when you were video editing and constantly pausing and making edits, because I was using this for that too, there'd be like a 2-second delay before you'd finally hear something. Now it was always in sync. It was lined up with the video. So it's not really a latency as it was just an initial delay. the version V122 firmware, which they give you some guides on how to upgrade and flash the firmware through a document and file. I'll have a link in the description for that. But that fixed the sleep issue. They disabled that. Otherwise, before I had to go through like a software hack to make it work. And I was going to do that full walkthrough in this video, but the firmware fixed it. So that's not an issue anymore. So that about wraps up the review. And there's not a lot too much more to elaborate on the amp DAC side. I think and I hope I covered it well enough to cover your concerns for gaming. It's just a very clean, extremely resolving, neutral, musical sounding amp DAC. It doesn't sound as dark or compressed as the topping. It doesn't sound as warm as the iFi Zen DAC Air, which I like them both for different reasons. The reason why I like this is because I can basically plug anything into it, get my perfect channel balance at any volume level, and drive really hard to drive headphones or extremely sensitive IEMs. It's not perfect. Please change the filter away from filter 3 to 1 or 6 or a couple others, but experiment. And I think that'll make a big difference. I think for the money, this is an absolute home run though. I'm really happy with it. And hopefully you found this video helpful. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next video because I'm going to be catching up on a lot of awesome audio stuff, if you can tell. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.